While not as widespread as some other invasive species, the cane toad holds the title of the most hated invasive animal in Queensland, Australia. Other notable invasive species in the country include rabbits, considered the most destructive. Rabbits affect over 300 threatened species by destroying vegetation, competing with native grazing animals, and indirectly increasing predator populations, such as cats and foxes. Feral pigs also pose a significant threat, impacting 149 threatened species by destroying habitats and directly preying on vulnerable wildlife. Additionally, feral cats, red foxes, and goats further contribute to the ongoing challenges faced by Australia's native ecosystems. The cane toad, a native of South America, has earned its place among the most hated invasive species in history. Its journey to infamy began in the 1930s, when Australia's Bureau of Sugar Experiment Stations imported the toads from Hawaii and introduced them to combat a growing crisis of beetles. Sugarcane, an essential crop for Queensland's economy since the 1860s, faced significant losses due to cane beetles devouring its roots and killing the plants. By the 1880s, the problem had become severe enough to pressure the Queensland government into finding a solution. At the time, toxic chemical pesticides were the primary defense, but they posed risks to the environment and human health. The Bureau hoped that introducing cane toads as natural predators would offer a safer, more sustainable alternative. This decision was deeply rooted in the historical significance of sugarcane. As one of the earliest cash crops, sugarcane dominated colonial economies across the Caribbean in the 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries, supplying 80 to 90% of the sugar consumed in Western Europe. By the time it was commercially grown in Queensland, sugarcane had already become a linchpin of global agriculture. However, the beetle infestation threatened this lucrative industry, prompting drastic measures. Unfortunately, the cane toads not only failed to control the beetles, but quickly became an ecological disaster of their own, spreading uncontrollably and devastating native wildlife. The government imported the toads, bred them, and released them. They were convinced the cane toad was the answer to a major agricultural crisis in the sugar industry, as they had reportedly solved similar beetle problems in Hawaii, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico. On the 19th of August 1935, 2,400 toads were released into sites around Gordonvale. In less than 2 months, the number of toads had increased at least 24-fold. Further releases of toads in the Cairns and Innisfail areas soon followed. Although another Australian scientist named Walter Froggatt voiced concerns about the release around this time, but it all fell on deaf ears. By December of that year, a further release of the toad was done. Subsequently, in September of 1936, toads were then released throughout the sugarcane regions of Queensland. As this turned disaster, an investigation revealed that no evidence of any pre-release testing to determine if the toads even ate the cane beetles. The extremely short time frame between the toads arriving in Australia and the first release supports this. The beetles that the toads were supposed to control were native Australian species, different to those causing problems in Hawaii and Puerto Rico. Yet no trials were carried out to see if this translated to Australian conditions. Another significant challenge was the mismatch between the cane toads and their intended prey. The beetles often live at the tops of sugarcane plants, which cane toads cannot climb to reach. Additionally, the beetles lay their eggs in the soil, where the larvae remain underground. Since cane toads cannot dig, they are unable to feed on these larvae, rendering them ineffective in controlling the beetle population. It is not surprising that cane toads were imported and released with apparently little to no checks or control measures in place. Colonial Australia had a rich history of acclimatization societies and settlers who introduced foxes, rabbits, deer, blackberries, and other species in the 1800s, mainly for food, hunting, or the purpose of making the new country feel more like Mother England. Cane toads turned out to be a flop in Hawaii's battle against beetles, much like their underwhelming performance in Australia. Before billionaires started buying up Hawaii, the island was a major producer of sugarcane and had many sugar plantations. But Hawaii's sugar plantation didn't suffer only in the hands of beetles. There was another. In a twist of irony, the islands introduced yet another invasive species, mongooses, to deal with a different sugar pest: rats. Sugar planters there had introduced the mongoose from India into their fields. This supposedly was successful in significantly reducing the sugarcane damage caused by rats. Initially, 72 mongooses from Jamaica were brought in and were raised. Their offspring were shipped to plantations on other islands, first Maui, then Molokai, and finally Oahu. However, none were introduced on the island of Kauai. Not everyone on Big Island was in favor of bringing in the mongooses. They felt there should be more research on how mongooses were faring in the war on rats in the Caribbean, and that the research should be completed prior to bringing the animals. Unfortunately, those warnings went unheeded, so the mongooses were brought to Hawaii and released into the fields to kill the rats. However, there was one small problem. Rats are nocturnal animals, meaning they're only awake at night. Mongooses are only awake during the day, so the two never came in contact with each other. Instead of ridding the cane fields of rats, the mongoose began destroying some of Hawaii's most native species and fauna. Many bird populations and turtle eggs declined as the mongoose would feed on unprotected nests. It continued to get worse when the mongoose started reproducing and needing food for their young ones. Special fencing was put up just to keep them out of nature sanctuaries and reserves. The historical missteps in introducing cane toads to Queensland and mongooses to Hawaii underscore the catastrophic consequences of poorly researched ecological interventions. Both cases demonstrate the dangers of prioritizing short-term solutions over comprehensive, science-backed strategies. These invasive species not only failed in their intended roles, but also wreaked havoc on native ecosystems, leading to long-lasting ecological damage. Their stories serve as cautionary tales, reminding us that solving one problem without understanding the broader environmental context can often create even greater challenges. As we navigate future conservation and agricultural decisions, it is imperative to rely on rigorous research, critical assessment, and global collaboration to safeguard biodiversity and ecosystems. Thanks for watching. Support our channel by hitting the like and subscribe button. Until next time, remain curious.